Oh, well, he's very popular, Ed. The sportos, the motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, dickheads, they all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
That is why I have got to catch him this time. To show these kids that the example he sets is a first-class ticket to nowhere.
Oh, Ed, you sounded like Dirty Harry just then.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Mark, you there?
I am here.
All right, so there's 5 of us in the room. We're just going to take a brief moment to introduce ourselves. I'm Matt. I'm Mark. I'm Luke.
Hey, Luke.
I'm here.
I'm sorry. Who's the third guy?
This is Pierre. Yeah.
Pierre.
And
Fourth guy's Tommy.
Tommy.
5th and final guy is Jason. Nice to meet you, Mark.
Awesome.
So,
nice to meet all you guys.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. We just wanted to kick off the little question period here. If you just wanted to give us a little brief explanation on why you started believing in the Flat Earth Society.
Sure. And I'd probably like to clarify right up front that officially no one in, if you want to call it Flat Earth 2.0, is actually in the formal Flat Earth Society. The Flat Earth Society is kind of the old guard, and once social media kind of got involved, everybody that started making content just kind of eclipsed what the Flat Earth Society was doing, to where, I've done 3 conferences so far, and none of the people that were speaking at the conferences were involved with the Flat Earth Society. In fact, they finally made a public statement to media just after this last conference because of the controversy there, which we can get into later. But anyway, how did I get into Flat Earth? How about that?
Yes.
Flat Earth concept, we're actually pretty, believe it or not, we're pretty picky on verbiage. Like when people say, why do you think the Earth is flat and not round? It's like, well, don't say round. A dinner plate is round. Your dining room table may be round.
Spherical. Yeah,
exactly. Sphere, ball, globe, that sort of thing. So, so I got into it back in 2014 when I was just kind of what I like to call conspiracy bored. I looked at just about every conspiracy you could think of, and I had my opinions on just about all of them. Some I liked, some I didn't. And everybody that's, whether they're in conspiracy or not, know about Flat Earth. They've heard this term,
Definitely.
And most of us hate it because it's like, oh yeah, anyone who thinks it's flat is ridiculous, because we all know we were shown the globe when we were 6 years old, and it continued throughout, up through university. And I thought it was a terrible idea, and I saw this guy who made a video. He was German. And he was talking about how the flight routes in the southern hemisphere don't make sense. The connections are all weird, and they shouldn't be that way. They're widely exaggerated, and they're 2 and 3 times the distance they should be. And he goes, the only reason that they make sense if it's on a flat map. And I go, oh, that's kind of interesting. I don't believe it, but I'm going to look into it. And so I started looking into it in summer of 2014, and then that was the worst thing I could ever do. Like most flat earthers, you get into Flat Earth because you try to debunk it. Everybody tries to shut it down, and then eventually you run out of debunking angles. And then I finally flipped in the beginning of 2015 when that February 10th, 2015, woke up in the middle of the night and said, you know what? I can't prove the globe in a court of law anymore, so I'm just going to make a series of videos, kind of like a cry for help to the internet, and say, okay, this is where, tell me where I went wrong. And I started making what's now known as the Flat Earth Clues, and thought for sure that some academic would call me up and blow me out of the water, and instead, here we are over 3 years later, and it's just getting bigger and weirder and stranger, and it is my life now. So that's how I got into it.
Mark, you said you couldn't prove it in the court of law anymore. Could you expand on that?
Sure. If you treat the flat Earth versus the globe like a court case, and there's tons and tons of court case television and movies that have been out there over the years, we kind of all get the gist of what happens in that. It's not that I can prove the flat Earth with 100% certainty. If I could, I'd be the most famous person ever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I can create so much reasonable doubt in the globe that you really have nowhere else to go but the flat Earth or a version of it. And which is why it's kind of open-ended. There are people that believe that the flat Earth has a domed structure over the top, like a Truman Show. There's some people that believe there is no dome. There's other people that think there's lands outside a certain radius, and there's a bunch of different camps. But what everyone agrees on is that it's not the globe anymore, which is why we have such an amazing retention rate. Flat Earth, once you get into it, there's a 99% chance that you're not going to leave it. Not to use something cliche as once you go flat, you never go back, but it's kind of true. You can't go back to the globe. It is really kind of out of the matrix, red pill, blue pill, which is, once, our retention rate is higher than most major religions. And that's kind of weird in a way.
Yeah, but like, wouldn't you say that, like, if I'm such a firm believer in the Earth, I can't really see myself going back because I have so much evidence against the Earth being a globe or round or spherical, that I don't think I could ever believe in a flat Earth because it just wouldn't make sense mathematically. And
are you talking about from the other side, as far as if you're globe and you well, the globe thing also true, which is not to call the globe a cult. There's some that do. I mean, it's just conditioning, and the conditioning is 500 years old, so it's a long time. But once you believe, I like to tell people, if you have a master's degree in any physical science, there's nothing I can do for you. The conditioning, you're too far gone at that point. Until mainstream says different, you are going to believe in the globe.
Yeah.
Okay. So what kind of tests have you done to prove that it is flat rather than spherical?
Gotcha. Where should we start? The first ones that happened weren't even my idea. In fact, most of the stuff isn't my idea. What I like to tell people is, if flat Earth is a metaphorical university, I would be the freshman recruiter. So I usually get people in the door with, if you watch the clues, with simple concepts, very little math and a lot of connecting the dots. But one of the first things that happened when people got into flat Earth is, and it's the most common because, 75% of our world is water, is they ran to the beaches with high definition cameras and just started shooting long distances. And I was like, well, what are you doing that for? And the theory is pretty easy, and that is, if you believe in the globe, then there has to be a curvature formula. And the curvature formula, if it's less than like 1,000 miles distant, is roughly 8 inches per mile squared, which is, again, for those out there that are listening that forgot their high school algebra, it means 8 inches times every mile times itself. So 3 miles would be 3 times 3, which is 9, times 8 inches, which is 72, and 10, 10 times 10 times 8 is 8. And it gets more and more severe as you get farther out, because it's going to turn into, eventually vertically fall off. So like at 50 miles, you're talking 50 times 50 times 8, which is pushing 1,700 feet. Yeah. And you say, okay, what's the point? The point is that when you look off the distance, it's one of the oldest arguments there is, which is, how do you know, without using NASA or any of the space agencies, how do you know it's a globe? And eventually somebody's going to come back and say, well, we see ships going over the horizon. If you live next to the water, you guys are up there near water. Ships go over the horizon. We've all seen this, right? The ships, they go away and they're gone. And that's it. That's because they went over the horizon. It's like, yep, they used to be. Not anymore. Now, with HD digital zoom, now you can let that boat go. I mean, you can let it go a long ways and then, wait another 10 minutes and crank up your zoom, and that boat's back, the whole boat. And then you let it go again, you crank up the zoom even further. I mean, the P1000 by Nikon, which was released earlier this year, has a 125 power zoom, which is ridiculous. I don't even know why most people would use it, but apparently it comes in handy. And that right there, that is one of the easiest tests to do. And the short version is this: once an object gets far enough away from you, it should be over the hill. It should be on the other side of a hill. And it's not anymore, to where now I put a challenge out to science. I said, show me an object that you think is, far enough distance away that we should never be able to see it under any weather conditions. And it's never been done. Now we can even, you throw an infrared daytime filter on that lens, and we're seeing stuff that's ridiculously far away. And Sorry, no, I tend to ramble, but there's
Go for it.
one of the arguments is, well, if what you're saying here is true, then why don't we see Japan from California? And then I have to come back, and unfortunately, now I've had to memorize all these little scientific factoids just to reinforce my arguments. Which is, well, you got to remember what you're breathing right now. All that stuff that's around you isn't exactly oxygen, and it's only about 99% transparent. You're breathing in, water is H2O, and you're breathing in N4O. It's 4 parts nitrogen to 1 part oxygen.
Nitrogen.
You're describing the atmosphere.
Yeah, the atmosphere that we're all breathing. And so what happens is, as you get further and out, that 99% becomes 98 and 97 and 80 and 70 and 60, and because you're looking really through a kind of a thin version of water. And it just gets thick enough that eventually you just can't see far enough. But my argument is, well, if you pulled that atmosphere out, not that that's feasibly possible, but if you could do that, then that you could see a long distance. In fact, the guys that we have now going up in airplanes that are shooting with infrared filters at about 30,000 feet, they can see distances because there's much less. The atmosphere is much thinner up there. They can see upwards of 500 miles. Which should not be possible at 30,000 feet. And I thought it was a fluke. So that's probably the easiest test. Other ones would be like laser tests, where you're shooting across mostly across water, because water is level. And those are the 2 big tests that we're doing on a regular basis. Other stuff include the moon temperature test. I thought that one was fascinating. I even thought that was ridiculous when I first heard it. Did you guys know about the moon temperature test?
No, we've never heard of it.
Oh, this one's great. You guys can test this yourself. You can go to the hardware store, and you pay in Canadian dollars. So it'd be like $22. So it was like $20. You can go to a hardware store and pick up one of those point and click infrared thermometers that mechanics use it for engines and road asphalt and crap like that.
Yeah.
And what happened, and somebody told me, I was on a show, and somebody called in. They said, "Hey, Mark, did you know the moonlight's cold?" And I go, "Huh?" I go, "You mean it's colder at night?" No, man. The moonlight is like cooling things down. It's like a refrigerant. And I go, "Yeah, I'm still not getting it." And they go, "Okay, man. So if and I'm sorry, I'm not going to convert it to Celsius for you guys, because it's 80 degrees in the sun and it's 70 degrees in the shade. We all know this because the shade blocks some of the sunlight. Yeah. Well, if you go into the moonlight, it's the opposite. It's 50 degrees in the moonlight and it's 60 degrees in the moon shade. And that shouldn't be possible. And it's always this way. It's always warmer. In fact, up to 13 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're saying, okay, well, does this prove a flat Earth? No, it does not. But what it does is it creates a huge doubt in the relationship between the sun and the moon, because the moon is supposedly lit up as a reflection of the sun, and bouncing back some of that radiation back down on the ground. Now, I'm not saying that it should, the moonlight should be giving off a warm light, but it should at the very least be neutral. It shouldn't be giving off a cool light. As a matter of fact, only recently did universities discover that they can actually generate, it shouldn't shock anybody, they can generate a refrigerated laser. It's called it's a cool laser that they can point at things and actually cool things down. It's just a light spectrum. And so the question is, why is the moon generating this light frequency? And because there's no way it can do it from reflecting just sunlight. And science, and we just found that out about 18 months ago, and science is just scrambling. They don't even know what to make of it. So yeah, it's little tests like that, but all these little things add up, and it's fascinating to watch. My favorite test, if you don't mind me throwing this in real quick, is something I wrote. I did a clue recently called the Lost Nail, which was I took it from a guy, one of our members out in the UK, which he said that pressure needs a container. And he kept repeating it. Pressure needs a container. I was going, okay. It's a real basic law of physics, which is if you have a can of spray paint or a can of hairspray or an airplane fuselage, right? Sure. There's difference. There's more pressure on the inside than on the outside. In fact, imagine if you're holding a basketball in your hand, right? What makes the basketball do what it does? And it's because there's more atmosphere inside the basketball. And you have more molecules trying to equalize with the lesser of molecules that's outside the room. Okay, what's the point? The point is that this is universal, right? Even though I don't like using that word necessarily, but it's universal with with everything, right? It doesn't matter if it's a basketball or football or a volleyball or a car tire. You pump it up, and that air is going to want to get out, and it's going to make it really stiff. So if you have a hard container, it's just going to put stress on the shell. If you have a soft container, like a leather basketball or whatever it is, it's going to expand it until it makes it rigid. And then if you put too much pressure in there, it's gonna explode, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I noticed that there's only two objects that I've ever seen out there in the world that we deal with that doesn't follow this rule. One of which is the astronaut suit. The astronaut suit is just an inflated, it's just a balloon in the shape of a person, right? And it's just a thick balloon. I mean, not that much thicker than a basketball. And people say, well, it's because of layers. Go, no, my winter coat has layers. All that does is keeps the cold out. Layers immediately collapse and compress once a vacuum field is applied. And yet this astronaut suit and all the astronaut suits we've ever had ever since the 1960s, they all act the same way. They're very flexible. You can bend your arms and knees. It should literally be like that kid in the Christmas Story movie when he had all those those jackets on. He's going, I can't put my arms down. It should be like that all the time, and it's not. And at the very least, even if you think you had the muscle power to move your arms, because it'd be fighting you the entire time.
Yeah.
Your fingers wouldn't be able to work. You might as well be wearing oven mitts. And yet these guys are doing complex electronics. They're aligning satellite dishes and the whole nine, everything you could think of. And I thought that was fascinating because the early films, you can look this up, when NASA was testing astronaut suits, they knew they couldn't do this. And they were working with plastics and metals and people, the test.
Sorry, just to cut in real quick.
Yeah.
So when you refer to the astronauts, you mean when they were on the moon, right? Correct?
Yeah. Well, the moon to start.
In general.
Yeah. The astronauts when the Apollo program and before that Mercury and Gemini. And
so you suggested that they wouldn't be able to move due to pressure, correct?
Oh, absolutely, they wouldn't be able to move. The suit would be fighting them at all times.
So, do you believe in zero gravity in outer space?
Gravity, the fun question of gravity. Okay, I believe there's two schools of thought here because there's quite a few flat earthers that believe in density. Which is, so if you take you take that same basketball and you put it underneath in a swimming pool and you let it go, it's going to pop to the surface because of a pressure difference, right? However, that doesn't, and some people just completely believe in that, and they say that's all it is density, because if you're in an enclosed pressurized system, then the atmosphere, which we're breathing, which is a thin version of water, would kind of be like that. And it's like, yeah, that's not bad, but it's not an absolute. There is exceptions to the rules. Like, for example, if a fighter pilot pulls on a stick and goes straight up, well, there's no extra atmosphere in that capsule, and yet something is pinning him back to that seat. Let me throw gravity at you real quick.
It'd probably be like the thrust of the engine then, right?
Well, yeah, there is some sort of force. Is it
inertia?
Yeah, well, that's just it. And mainstream science and all your best scientists will tell you the same thing. They all say that we can't tell you what gravity is. We can only tell you what it does. We can only tell you the symptoms of it. And that's they say it's this magical magnetic force that pulls things to the center of the ball. And that's really not much different than my opinion of it, which is it's just a mysterious magnetic force that pulls straight down. That's really the difference between the two. And I'm a big simulation theory guy. I was in software for years and years. And anyone that knows anything about physics engines in software, it's like, look, gravity is what we say it is. So
sure.
Yes, do I believe in gravity? Yeah, I do. Do I think the density could be part of it? Sure, why not? I mean, we're breathing a pressurized fluid, for lack of a better term, now. So why not?
So I have two questions. So one question is, you say you believe in gravity, right?
Yes.
How would you say that would exactly work on a flat Earth diagram?
Imagine that. Is there a second part to that question?
Yeah, there's a second part.
Okay.
And then so if we're taking, for example, they have airplanes that would let you experience for a certain amount of money,
Zero
gravity.
gravity.
Yeah, they're known as
So-
the vomit comet and almost exclusively used
yeah.
by our
Like,
astronauts. Yeah.
Like, how would that work in a flat Earth society if you could explain it as
Sure.
to why that would occur?
Sure. All right. So in a flat Earth model, imagine, for those of you who are listening, don't know exactly the concept we're talking about here. Earth isn't a globe. It is a sports stadium with walls and a floor and a ceiling, and the floor is pretty much flat. And I know there's valleys and hills and water and stuff like that, but the edges line up. So, one edge of the stadium is the exact same elevation as the other edge of the stadium. And the walls, how far out they are, it's got to be thousands of miles off the Antarctic coast. And then the ceiling would be, I don't know, it's got to be less than 5,000 miles up. 3,000 would be fine. I mean, remember, the best spy planes cap out at about 20 miles.
Sure.
So when it comes to gravity, though, it's just, again, this magical let's call it a molecular magnet that pulls things straight down. No different than a physics engine in a video game. But instead of just pulling metal, it can pull organics. And once you have that, the rest is pretty easy. You just set it to whatever you need. It's like, okay, we want it to fall the objects to fall at 32 feet per second in this type of atmosphere. But when it comes to the planes, you got to remember the vomit comet, or that's a crude name. The zero G planes. No, seriously, it's no joke. One of the reasons why they call it that is because when you're free falling, your stomach immediately kind of pushes up, and it simulates that nausea feeling, which is super gross.
Yeah, we've seen all the videos.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Those are the videos they don't tell you about. It's like, oh, yeah, everybody's smiling. Look, I'm spinning around. No. The idiots is like, don't eat on those things. You will absolutely hurl.
With a flat stomach, and you're good.
Oh,
So
yeah.
have any member of the Flat Earth Society ever tried to go, like, if they were a pilot or something, have they ever tried to go over the walls of the stadium?
Good question. And by the way, not the Flat Earth Society, just so you know. Now, officially, no worries. I mean, no, people, look, mainstream media makes this mistake all the time because what else would you know? As a matter of fact, when I was one of the early people to get into this, I kind of served as a warning for others because I joined one of the early Flat Earth Societies in 2014 just because I didn't know anything. It's like, oh, these guys got to know something. And then I realized they seem to be either gatekeepers or just apathetic. I couldn't even get one of them to call me until like 18 months in when we were already, rocketing up the charts in YouTube. And I had to be real blunt with them. I said, no offense, guys, but where have you been? It's like, now you're saying, oh yeah, we think what you're doing is great. It's like, yeah, that's awesome. But none of you guys even have YouTube pages. But as far as, rushing towards the edge, as it were, the edge of the stadium, very, very tough to do because the powers that be, and let me preface it with, let's say this particular building that we're in, right? This terrarium, this planetarium, this Hollywood soundstage is so huge. It's so large that even our best and brightest basically didn't figure it out until almost 1960. And because they didn't have the technology, really, until you get decent air travel, you don't know anything. Until the internal combustion. In fact, if we didn't have the internal combustion engine, we'd still be kind of in the dark on this. We just didn't know. And then when they found out, the United States and the Soviet Union figured it out together in 1960.
Yeah.
They decided to kind of keep it under wraps. They decided, okay, do we tell the public that the institution of science is not exactly infallible? They made an error in judgment here, so they locked it down and they put in place in 1959 the Antarctic Treaty, which says that no corporation, no matter how much money you have, no matter how big you are, no matter how influential you are, no corporation can set up shop down in Antarctica forever. And if you decide to come on as an economic power, you guys 5 in your room, you start your own country and you become super huge. Who knows why? They would put this piece of paper in front of you and said, oh yeah, by the way, you got to sign this. And sign what? It means you can't go down to Antarctica. Now you can go down as a tourist. You can go down and have your picture taken with penguins and put on the orange life vests and ride in the inflatable rafts and do all that stuff. But in fact, they even banned drones 2 years ago. Just out of, it's like, oh, why would you ban drones? Like, nope, they're banned. It's an environmental hazard. It's like, what? What are you talking about? They really take it seriously down there.
Can I just cut in here? So I just wanted to say that, one, if we are a big corporation, I don't know why we'd want to be in Antarctica.
And we'd
Just
be
for one.
producing more, and would be warming the climate.
Yeah.
No. Okay, a corporation. Well, no, I got to mention this because it was in the clues that I did. There was a great speech. It wasn't even a speech. It was an interview of Admiral Richard Byrd, who was the United States youngest admiral of all time. And he went on a television show in 1954. And because he was basically doing expeditions down there nonstop from 1928 up until his death in 1957. And he came on television, national television. And remember, there was only 3 channels back then. And I don't know how many channels Canada had back in the 50s. Couldn't have been many. They had the CBC, right? That's that's
exactly.
a big thing.
CBC. You got it.
So I, as you guys probably know, I lived in Victoria for a year.
Okay, yeah.
Or maybe you didn't. With a lovely Canadian girl of Polish descent, and I'll never say anything bad about her. But she was great. Anyway, so sorry, where's it going with this? So Admiral Byrd went on television and he told everybody that the place had tons and tons of resources. He was basically hyping the corporations at that point. He said there's an entire mountain range made out of coal that could supply the whole world. There was oil, there were minerals, there was uranium. That alone would bring in the United States and the Soviet Union back then. And the whole place basically made out of money. And he's like, yeah, in fact, he was worried that there was going to be disputes over it. And then the very next mission that he went down, which was Operation Deep Freeze, 55 to 56, that's when everything changed. That's Murphy's Law for you. It's like, well, we can't find the outer wall, as it were, so let's just make money. And then they found it, but they didn't, of course, there was no official release that they found it. And then everybody got off the ice at the same time. All the countries were pulled, and there was like at least a dozen down there at the time. Yeah. And, countries that needed resources, England was still rebuilding after World War II. The Soviet Union absolutely needed the resources, and so on and so on. And they all agreed to the treaty. It's the only treaty in the history of humankind that's never been broken. And it's bulletproof, and here's the big thing. I can't stress this enough. Not only are you not allowed to go down as a corporation, you're not even allowed to talk about it. Yeah. Meaning, again, if I was the head of British Petroleum, I'd be like running full page ads in the New York Times every week saying how great it would be for British Petroleum to go down there. And they're not even allowed to do that because they don't want, some memo gets passed around, I'm sure just national security. It's like, yeah, you're not supposed to talk about that. And any president that takes over from your position, make sure he knows you're not supposed to talk about that.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
just to cut in here. So when you're talking about Antarctica and all the, it is known for being frozen most of the year.
Right. Frozen all of the year.
Sorry?
It's frozen all of the year from what we're told.
Yeah. So it is known that the polar ice caps are melting, and it's a huge issue for polar bears and just the rest of the world due to the climate change that's happening. It's it's a known thing that you need to protect that part of the world.
Right.
But I would say it's part of the environment, and just due to the environment, are you saying that it's solely because they're trying to protect the edge of the world that you say is
good question. I know where you're going
just
with.
Because the environment, because the polar ice caps are so important to the rest of the world. They have so much to do with the circulation of the air, the water. Like, it has monumental benefits towards the rest of the world that part of the Earth exists.
I absolutely agree with you, but, and there's a big caveat here, but in 1959, nobody knew about any of that stuff at all. We didn't even know what ozone layer meant in 1959.
Yeah, the 60s.
Remember, Greenpeace wasn't even started until the early 1970s, and that was just a couple of guys in some tie-dye shirts and a raft, and they were they were more concerned with whaling than anything else. Antarctica, that was the furthest thing from their minds. The environmental layer of the treaty, that's just the part that the public, just like you, it's like, well, it's an environmental thing, we shouldn't really mess with it. But it brings up a good question, or a good point, which is climate change, because I get this question question, probably 1 in 20, which is, do I think that climate change is real? And I go, yeah, I do. And two things. One, I thought it was interesting that all the scientists made sure they changed the name from global warming to climate change because it sounds less dire. It sounds less like a disaster movie. And two, the climate change would be much more pronounced in an enclosed system. So, if you're in like a sports stadium and they do like the fireworks, or, you guys aren't old enough to remember when you could smoke back in smoke. But if a lot of people are smoking, that whole ceiling, you had like 40-foot thick of smoke up there. And that's just a stupid sports stadium with, 20, 30,000 people in it. You've got 7 billion people. And it's not even necessarily, cigarettes or anything like that. It's mostly ironically enough, the internal combustion engine, which allowed us to discover it. Because a car's engine is really just a compact furnace. And we have billions of those things running all the time in some part of the world. I mean, when we're sleeping, somebody else is running their cars and vice versa. And that gets amplified inside an enclosed system. And even though this place is built very, very well, it'd be like you're going to get some wild changes. I call it wild weather because there has been some really weird stuff. It'd be like taking a propane lantern into a car with an air conditioning system. And then you're saying, well, what's that? I'm going, well, that propane lantern is going to affect the triggers on that air conditioning system. Then bring in 2, then bring in 5, and then see what starts happening to the people in that car. Things get really, really weird. You get gusts over here, cold pockets over here. So I do believe in climate change. I absolutely think it's real, but I think it's also one of the indicators that we're living in a building.
Okay. So I just wanted to jump to another question here. It involves the moon. So are you familiar with eclipses?
I not only am I familiar with eclipses.
Okay.
I was in the blackout zone last year for the great.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So how was it?
It was the closest thing to magic I've ever seen in my life. It was amazing. You don't do it justice. People I know we call it the Great American Eclipse because we're America. We do things like that. But we so there was these bands. It's like if you're the 70% zone or the 80%, right, or even 90, you saw nothing. 90%, you saw nothing until you get to the 98, 99, and 100%. That's when it turns surreal. That's when you're really feel like you're living in a movie.
Yeah.
Only in real time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
go ahead.
Just to expand on my eclipse question here. So with the flat Earth model, I've done some research and I watched you had a on YouTube. You had a little interview on. It was like ABC News. They interviewed you at a conference, I believe in Denver. But
yeah,
I saw some of the video images of the flat Earth models, and I just wanted to know how you would explain eclipses with that model.
Okay.
Because from my understanding, eclipses would not happen with the given model.
Well, okay. Two quick things. One is the flat Earth model that is shown is probably the most simplified thing. It's basically to get people thinking about it. Yes, we have a tiny sun and a tiny moon, and they appear to be 3-dimensional, and they appear to be less than 3,000 miles high, revolving. They
are 3-dimensional. It's a sphere. The moon is a sphere.
Yes, unless it's a 2-dimensional representation of it.
What do you mean it's a representation? The moon, like, people landed on the moon in the 60s. And that was before computers were ever a thing, so there's no way that it was created in a Hollywood basement.
No. Oh, boy. Okay, hang on. You'll be okay. Trust me on this.
Photoshop.
No. Okay, first
Photoshop is fucking expensive.
First
and
thing.
I want you to think that in order to recreate the moon landing, the amount of money that would have to gone into that is insane.
It's worth more than it would take to actually
go to the moon. Like it's just, I think it's ridiculous to say that the moon isn't a spherical.
Why? Okay, all right. I got you. I hear you. I hear your passion, man. Don't worry about it. I see this all the time. All right, so let's say, and I go again. This dates me, and I don't know if you have a planetarium. And I'm gonna actually use the term in Van or Vic, but people know what I'm talking about. So, but if you have a planetarium there, and I don't know if you guys have ever been, because planetariums are super boring, and it's mostly for older people, and I am older. But if you go into a planetarium, you look up at the moon, if it's a decent projection system, it looks pretty spherical, right? And so I throw people, I go, hey, take your binoculars out, zoom in on that thing. You know, what do you think? Does it look spherical? Yeah. Can't land on it though. No. And then you say, well, yeah, but we're inside a planetarium. And I say, well, if you walk outside of this building, who's to say you're not in a much, much bigger building? To your point, though, as far as why would the Americans fake it? And oh my Lord, the amount of money it would cost to fake it. Here's the problem. And that is eventually, in fact, look, the Americans are the last people that want to, we're rah, go team, wave the flag. Most people, it's sacrilege to even talk about Apollo like it could have been fabricated. However, you got to remember, when the nerds started kind of coming in force, in the late 70s, early 80s, when nerds actually became a thing, they started analyzing anything they could. It was all about data input, and they started looking at the moon landings, and the telemetry, and the shadows, and the blast crater, and the fact that nobody has feats of strength, and all this other stuff. And this was way before the internet, and they had doubts even back then. Mm-hmm. And so, but here's where it goes. Yeah. Let's say you figure out that the world is a building. Eventually, you're going to run into a problem because as your technology gets better and better, sooner or later, you're going to have to show people a picture of the Earth. Well, how are you going to do that exactly? Oh, yeah, you could airbrush whatever. I know Photoshop didn't come in until way later. You could fabricate a picture all you want and start handing it out to people, but the first question is always going to be the same. It's like, wow, that's really a great picture. How'd you take it? And then you realize it's like, oh man, we actually have to create. Now, granted, we had our ballistic, the ICBM, the ballistic missile technology was already there, so we just based all our stuff off of weapon technology. But you have to create a program that, yes, does it cost a lot of money? Yes, but it's only money. It's only money and time, and back then it was worth it. Plus, you can employ a lot of people and maybe even turn a tidy profit. If you wanted to, creating a rocket program, because you have to at least give the impression that you could get high enough to take the picture, which they didn't do for a long, long time. Meaning, the big picture of the Earth, the Apollo 17 shot that everybody knows and loves. Well, why wasn't it taken during Apollo 9 or 10 or 11 or 12?
Because we already had the picture.
No. In fact, you can look this up. Look this up if you get a chance. Seriously, this is a great little factoid. The first picture, a full disc picture of the Earth ever taken in sunlight was from the 1972 Apollo 17 moon mission on the way back, supposedly.
Yeah, it's referred to as the blue marble.
The blue marble shot, absolutely. And that blue marble shot was the only blue marble shot ever taken until the summer of 2015.
40... Yeah, but I've witnessed a lot. I've watched a lot of interviews of people that believe in the flat Earth on YouTube.
Sure.
And they think that a lot of the images of Earth and of other planets are all composites. And if you actually research the blue marble image,
yes, it
is a raw photo that shows that Earth is spherical.
Is it?
Yes.
According to whom? Exactly. The United States military?
You go to NASA's website.
I know, but don't forget who NASA is, and don't forget the overall.
NASA's not a.
In your opinion, who do you think NASA is?
NASA is. I can tell you exactly who NASA is. NASA is a wing of the DoD. They always have been. Department of Defense. In fact, they are uniquely military. Their entire program is based on weapons technology. Yeah,
so
I know.
You're saying that everybody that goes to the space station,
yes,
is what, an actor?
What space station would that be?
Like the one that's like the space station.
No, and I'm not trying to be cute. I'm not trying to be cute, but what? So there's people living in this space station right now.
Yes.
Again, according to whom? Every one of those.
Have you seen live interviews?
Yes.
People?
Yes, and we have shredded them. Oh my God, their live production value is so unbelievably horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible because they're on the space station. You can't have a fucking
now
really
language
and a really, really
heavy,
heavily invested crew up there to film it. They're probably filming on a GoPro because they're on the space station. It's not a luxury mansion. Like they're sleeping upright.
It's not a priority for the space station to be
No. I'm not saying that they're on low rent and that their stuff up there looks kind of rinky-dink. I'm saying their production value when they're producing it is terrible. Look up little things like ISS hairspray. Is that there's no reason in a tactical environment why any of them should have hair at all. You got to remember, we're talking about a swimming pool filtration system when it comes to the scrubbers. And all these women have long hair. And what they did, seriously, look this up if you get a chance. It'll freak you out. What they did, it's like the women should not have long hair. But they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. In order to simulate zero G, to make them look like they're in zero G, we're going to perm their hair, and it's stiff enough you could bounce a quarter off, and it goes straight up. It should be flowing like they were in a swimming pool. But more importantly,
that's a requirement of the military. In order to get in the military, you have to have pretty much a buzz cut.
And also true. Yes. And 98%? Only out of the 500 people that have ever claimed to have even gone up that far, almost all of them are, in fact, pretty much all of them in the United States, they're all Air Force. I mean, they have to
start somewhere, though. They can't just go straight.
You cannot go up to the International Space Station with a degree in political science.
You have to start somewhere because you have to have training.
By the time anyone
feel the G-force that you experience going straight up into space towards the spherical moon. And can I just, while we're talking about rockets going up into space, can I just put out there the Challenger rocket that went up? What would you have to say about that? Because there was people who died on that, and there's families that lost their loved ones, significant others.
Did they lose?
Real?
Because
would you say that's real or fake? Because
I would absolutely no. I'm saying
on that spacecraft are just in hiding, and they were in a studio, and there's nobody actually on that rocket.
There was nobody on that rocket. It's one of the last things
you would say to the families, though, if you had a chance to speak to them.
Yes.
You would say, yes, your family members are still alive. They didn't die on that rocket.
Yep. I wouldn't even hesitate, because the last thing you would it's part of the contingency.
That's bold.
Say it's bold all you want. Look up. In fact,
they're dead.
They
died in the
look up.
It exploded. It exploded in front of our eyes. There's video of them walking onto the rocket.
Yes.
And there's people witnessing them dying.
Unedited, I'm sure. In fact, it was interesting. There was no interior shots, and if you look up Challenger astronauts still alive, you can Google this in 2 seconds. Challenger astronauts still alive. Click on images.
People think Tupac's still alive. That's ridiculous. That you think they're still alive.
Why? Okay, no. Think of it this way.
Think Tupac's still alive. Biggie's still alive. There's people who think people who are actually dead, who actually died, are still alive.
I know. Hey, look, I know this. I know this offends you. I know it does. Trust me. And the reason why it doesn't bother me is I've seen it time and time and time again. I've dealt with harder cases than you, and they all go our way before too long. I know you're saying it'll never happen to me. Really? 2 weeks without sleep watching stuff like this sort of content? Trust me, it will happen. I'm seeing it over and over again. You would never, ever put astronauts on a pile of liquid explosives, ever. I mean, it's basically just a giant bomb.
You would, because you're trying to expand the knowledge of,
especially during a space race.
Yeah,
they're not going anywhere. The space race was a complete lie. There was never any space race. The space race didn't exist. Didn't it bother anybody that the Americans get to the moon? The Russians are going, the Soviet Union is like beating us heads and just heads and shoulders all day long. They're beating us. And then all of a sudden the Americans get to the moon and the Soviet Union quits. Have you ever seen that?
They had a communist regimen, so of course
they quit. They were all about pride. Look up the Soviet Union propaganda posters on the space race. They were all in, and then all of a sudden they quit. And they didn't quit because they lost their will. It's like, full well how it should have gone. It was like, okay, Americans put 3 men, they put 4 men. We put a small base, they put a bigger base, and then Time magazine runs the cover and says, "Has the Cold War reached the moon?" That's how it should have gone. And instead, it just stopped. We get there, and Russia just quietly says, no, we don't have an interest in this anymore. And the reason why they had to quit is because, unfortunately, production you cannot run 2 studios in 2 different places and have the same production techniques. You are going to run into problems. There's going to be consistency issues. And so the Russians just gave it to us. Hollywood was way better at doing films back then than they were. They finally kind of caught up. And so Hollywood just ran with it, and that's it.
Okay.
I mean, for 50 years, we're right. Remember, next year is the 50th anniversary of Apollo. We've never gone back. Nobody's ever gone back. China, the British, the Europeans, Israel, India. Nobody's even ever attempted it. Come on.
So, Mark,
Yes.
to switch subjects a little bit,
Sure.
with regard to the actual flat Earth model,
Yes.
how do you explain the light distribution on Earth, considering that in what we know as the spherical model,
Right.
the side facing the sun of the rotational axis is lit up essentially,
Right.
and the side facing facing the sun.
I got you. It's the time zone problem, which is how can there be time zones on a flat Earth model if the light should be shining everywhere simultaneously? Shouldn't it be
Right,
daylight
right,
daylight all the time?
Yes.
That actually surprised us when we started working on the models, which wasn't. We didn't even have to do a computer simulation. We just did real simulations. Which was, you got to remember, in this model, the sun and the moon are very, very, very small. So mainstream science says that the sun is hundreds of thousands of miles wide and it's 93 million miles away, and the moon is 2,000 miles wide, but it's only 237,000 miles away.
Yeah.
In our model, they are they're incredibly tiny. And so the sun would be less than 50 miles wide, and the same thing with the moon, which of course works pretty well when it comes to eclipses, except that when we looked at eclipses, the sun appeared to be, when we were opening it up with Photoshop, it appeared to be eclipsing itself, which made a lot more sense. So yeah, the moon got there, but then the sun just dimmed its own light, which didn't even occur to me until we started breaking it down. It's like, of course, because we see a quarter moon and a half moon and a crescent moon.
Yes,
but,
we do. Yeah.
But the sun is always this.
Earth.
Because of the spherical Earth. Yes, because a waxing and waning crescent and all the moon phases and the blood moon cannot be faked in any way, shape, or form ever. Can't be faked. And by the way, just so the listeners know, it's not that human beings are faking these things when it comes to the blood moon and the waxing and waning crescents. We're talking about a technology here that's far, far above us and much, much older. Older versions of us. Whatever civilization built this place, not to use a line from Contact, is like, we don't know. It was just here when we got here. You know, but where's it going with this? Oh yeah, so the sun is super tiny, and as far as the direction of its light source, it may not even be omnidirectional, from what we can tell. But it can be replicated. You can do this yourself with a tiny light. Take a tiny LED light and put it over a big disc, and you will see that all it has to do is move off into the distance.
So you never.
What?
You know,
Ask.
With the eclipses, I just want to know how they work in the flat Earth model.
Sure. The eclipses in the flat Earth model would be, again, from the latest stuff that we had during the Great American Eclipse, the sun actually eclipses, it shuts down some of its own light source.
You think the sun shuts down some of its own light source?
Yes.
How? And what evidence supports that?
Isn't it fusion? Like,
who's measuring the fusion? Remember, if mainstream science says it's a giant thermonuclear device, right?
Yeah,
well,
sure, yeah.
What probes have we sent into the sun to test
they
this?
would melt before they even got there.
That's my point.
It's so hot that it
says
doesn't make sense for you to just send it.
again.
Sorry. Do you believe that the sun heats the Earth?
Partially, sure, but I don't think it's the only heating device by any stretch.
What do you think the actual main heating device is of the Earth?
The atmosphere would be the sun, but you also have the jet stream up above, and the water would be the underwater conveyor system, the magma system below there.
The reason the Earth is heated is because the sun's rays and the energy that is coming from the sun is trapped inside the atmosphere. The atmosphere isn't itself heating the Earth.
That's due to the greenhouse
unless it's a building. Does the sun keep you warm in your car, or is it the heater in your car?
The sun can heat your car. Yes,
The heater
yes.
does heat our car.
Have you
but
left your?
in the middle of the summer, if you have leather seats, have you ever got burnt by your car?
I have been burnt many times by leather seatbelts or black
Those hurt,
seatbelts. Sorry,
those hurt,
they
hurt,
they
those
sting.
hurt.
Oh yeah.
And again, believe me when I say this, I completely understand some of your point of view. Look, you're in university; you're being fed this on a daily basis. But science,
the term "fed" is I just
So
science is not infallible. Even you guys should know that. Perfect example. You guys, some of you guys, I don't know what your degrees are in. Some of you guys have heard of Lord William Kelvin.
Yes, okay,
Kelvin,
yeah,
absolute.
the Kelvin like measurement. Of
Exactly.
temperature.
His name is used every day in every university. Absolute temperatures are named after him. You know what else he's famous for? Anyone?
What was that?
He's also
You know,
known
Mark.
for saying that airplanes would never happen. Never were going to happen ever. And this wasn't like it was a long, long time ago. They were being built as he was saying this. He says the Aeronautics Society, it's never.
There's always doubters, man. There's always
Yes,
doubters.
but
That's why
this is the
flat earth
father
is a
of
thing.
this is the father of thermodynamics, and he was absolutely positively put it in a certificate you can frame wrong. So don't tell me. Neil deGrasse Tyson said one of the most arrogant things I've ever heard in my life. He said that science is true whether or not you believe in it. And yet, and fine, and I get that. If you want to tell me what the boiling temperature of water is at sea level, totally get that, because we can test that. You want to tell me what the core of the Earth is? Oh, that's a whole different story. You know, how deep is it to the core of the Earth right now? 4,000 miles, give or take? What's the deepest?
I have no idea.
If you believe in mainstream science, it's 4,000 miles, which is whatever it is in kilometers, right? The deepest hole ever drilled was it half that? 2,000? 1,000? 100? You got to remember, 1% is 40 miles. Deepest hole ever drilled, it was done by the Germans and the Russians, 8 miles. And yet we see the cross sections of every textbook. In fact, they used to have it in small print in the textbook. It's like, well, we really don't know what's down there, you know. And you see all the red and the yellow band and the white band.
We don't know what's in space either. So.
Oh, don't give me ammunition. Come on, don't make it that easy. Of course you don't know. Of course you don't know what's in space. Nobody knows what's in space.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Mark.
Yes.
To conclude, are you suggesting that the general population is susceptible to the mainstream media, or perhaps too susceptible?
And excellent.
Susceptible.
No, that's an excellent one. Is that our last question?
we have a couple.
No, we
yeah,
have some more.
Oh, okay.
We'll come up to
People have asked me, like, is the mainstream media, is the general population, have they been dumbed down? And are they susceptible to stuff? Well, yes and no. I don't try to be too negative. It's not that they're dumbed down. I think people are very smart. Yeah. But what's happened is that we've created such a broad band section of what I call junk food or fast food media that people memorize a lot of stuff, but most of it, they leave science to the scientists. So like if I ask you what an ERA stands for, you'll probably know what that is. If I say, if you want to give me Wayne Gretzky's, I'm using a Canadian thing for you guys, Wayne Gretzky's final 2 seasons, you could probably give me some of his stats. Some of you guys probably know him. And so on and so on. People memorize who the Kardashians are dating and other little fun things. But when it comes to especially in the United States, for example, we teach them reading, it's the 3 R's, which is terrible. Reading, writing, because there's only 1 R. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, right?
Yeah, I'm from California, so I know what you're talking about.
Perfect, right? But we don't teach anybody anything about physics, and science has kind of taken a back burner. And so, and I know this because I knew how this thing was going to resonate, because once we started telling people 8 inches per mile, right? I swear to God, I say 8 inches per mile, and everyone's like, "Yep, I'm with you." I go squared. They would just glaze over. I'm going, okay, well, you can forget about calculus and trig and advanced algebra and geometry, even basic algebra. Most people have forgotten because most people would never ever use it. So, but do they get influenced by the mainstream media? Of course. They believe. Why wouldn't you? There's some people in the States, it's from God's ears to Fox News, or God's lips to Fox News. And then they believe it. And if you're a Democrat, then it's God's lips or whatever deity you serve to NBC.
Wait, so to bring it back, you said that the Earth is like a building?
Like a building. You're basically in a giant soundstage.
So if we're in a building, does that mean we're in just a larger part of another society?
Yeah, exactly what I'm saying.
What would that society be like, in your opinion?
Wow, you're really going to go there?
I know.
No. It's okay. I mean, people will ask that from time to time. It's like, what does God think? And I was going, oh man.
Is that what God is?
Well, take one man's advanced civilization as another man's deity. So, what I try to say is I try to look at the kind of the hints, kind of the breadcrumbs, which is this world tends to be based 99% on conflict, which is it doesn't matter. It's an old Joe Walsh song, "Life's Been Good," which is it doesn't matter how rich or powerful or beautiful or talented you are. There's always something to complain about. I mean, you could have a 110 room mansion, you're going to be complaining about your servants. You could be, if you're a rock star, you're complaining about the tour dates. There's always, and I'd like to think that we're here. This is like a school more than anything. I don't think it's a prison necessarily, and I also don't think it's pure entertainment, obviously, because not a lot of people are having fun. But it does feel like school. I feel like we're here to learn something. And so outside of here, I think it's an unlimited universe, unlimited realm where you can do just about anything you want. It's unrestricted compared to where we are now, which is very, very restricted.
Sure. Sorry, I'm going to give you one last question, and we're going to try and wrap it up here.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, there's kind of two last questions, but
It's
one
okay.
I would like to say, how would you explain like tectonic plates and earthquakes? Because earthquakes have been a devastating feat of nature that have caused millions.
They're risk.
They're
a risk to us too. I'm sure.
Also, I would.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not that far.
How tides work, because tides are a thing because of the gravitational pull of the moon and the rise and sinking of the ocean.
Got it. All right. No, I hear you. Okay, so first thing, tectonic plates don't work that much different on a flat model either. They buckle and move around and shift, and you can have continental drift and. And in fact, on a flat model, I hate to say it, if you look at it, it's really, really interesting. If you take the continents, which used to be apparently like a supercontinent back in the beginning called Pangea, and if you look at the flat model, all the continents, the tiny little pointy edges they splay out kind of naturally. But if you look at it on a Mercator map or on a globe, all the pointy edges point down, which doesn't really make any sense. Seriously, if you think I'm kidding, take a Mercator map, turn it upside down, and look at it for a little while. The other part would be what you mentioned, the tides, which is not that part is very, very different, because if the moon is very, very tiny, then the last thing you would do is hook up.
It's not tiny.
It has again,
it's a big enough force that. Like, that's what our solar system is based off, the gravitational.
I completely understand what your textbooks say, but trust me, I've read some of them. And that is, if the moon was tiny, the last thing you would do is hook up some massive directional gravitational beam to it. The tides would be controlled kind of like the underwater conveyor system is controlled from underneath. It's an easier way to do it.
Yeah, so do you understand the concept of tidal lock?
Tidal lock.
So it's basically the reason that we don't see the other side of the moon. You understand that there's the dark side of the moon, right?
Which we never ever see. Doesn't that strike you as?
You Google pictures.
Oh no! I got that, but don't you think it's a little strange? We never ever see anything but the one side of the moon. It never shifts even a half degree in 1,000 years.
Yeah, so I just wanted to see what your standpoint on that was, and on why tidal lock exists and how it works with the flat Earth model.
Give me the definition of your definition of tidal lock.
So it basically, due to tides and due to the gravitational pull, it's the reason that we do not see the other side of the moon, and it's basically why. So you understand that the moon orbits Earth, correct?
No.
Okay. It does.
No, I don't. Sorry. It orbits Earth, but it's very tiny and orbits above us, like a mobile above a child's crib.
So, but how does it have the gravitational pull?
It doesn't have the gravitational pull. If the moon was super tiny, that you would not hook up a gravitational. Trust me, from a building standpoint, if you were going to build this from scratch, think of it as God's sandbox. If God made the moon really, really small, you're not going to do a gravitational force from the moon. You're going to control the tides from below. It's easier. In fact, one of the reasons this thing resonates as well as it does with the general population is because myself and other people have created a model that's actually easier to explain than the general heliocentric model. Heliocentric model is geometry and trig and calculus and stuff.
But it ends up making sense in the end because, I mean, I would not
To
say
you-
that I'm as smart as one
to-
of those very, very smart physicists
Yes.
or mathematicians.
Or
that
even
make
as you on this topic.
Yeah, exactly. But so I would not expect myself to understand totally how the Earth works because there's people who are way, way smarter than me who figure it out for themselves.
Bingo. Yes, you're absolutely right, which is why the
Yeah.
general population put their faith in those people. And
Because they're very, very smart and they make sense. Like there's a reason that their formulas and their
formula and
the way that they
Yep.
portray the information that are given.
You're right.
There's a reason that it works.
However, their formulas are now okay. Let me use this real quick. This will be easy to get across, and unfortunately be sad in a way. Which is Sun Tzu, Art of War, which is people are like water. They always take the path of least resistance. Right? Always. We always take the laziest option, which is why people text now instead of calling each other on the phone. We call each other for.
Would you say following the flat Earth would be the easiest route possible? Because
it is
I would
now.
tell you right now, based off the school I've done,
Yes.
Following around Earth, very, very hard, and a lot of the physics and math doesn't make fucking sense to me, but it works, and I've been shown
it works. It works because
why it works.
It works because
the flat Earth
Yes.
is the easier way out because you don't understand that the Earth is spherical and why everything else works the way it is.
Of course, to any human, the flat Earth could be a possibility, and the globe version of the Earth could be a possibility because we don't know.
The way you were saying it was a little convoluted, but let me shorten it, and that is people are I don't use that word. People are drawn to the flat Earth because it is now
easier to understand.
It is now easier to understand than the globe now. It is easier to understand, and
the world is a very complicated place, and a lot of things aren't understood. So it's hard to say. Like I would not agree with you that the Earth is flat, but I can see why many people would go with the Earth is flat because they feel it's an easier way to understand. But that just doesn't make sense to me.
I know.
Because there is many proven facts, and like I think the fact that you think the Earth or the moon landing is faked is ridiculous. I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
Because the American military would never lie to anyone ever about anything ever.
I'm not saying they wouldn't lie.
They do lie.
They lie about the moon landing.
No.
It's a ridiculous idea to say that the moon landing was fake because there's just so much proven facts as why the Earth would be round and why they wouldn't. Like it's spherical. Sorry.
I got you. I
don't know why they would lie about landing on the moon.
I can tell you. In fact, that frustration I totally got because for years, even before flat Earth, I was trying to figure out because I was like, why would they even bother lying about this thing? It's not that they wanted to lie about the moon landing; they had to. If they do not lie about the moon landing, eventually the corporations, the big contractors, and by that I mean the military guys, McDonnell Douglas and Boeing and General Dynamics and all these guys that make the parts for NASA, eventually they're going to get involved and eventually they're going to try to go up on their own. And they cannot have that. They had to control space. They had to militarize space and control the upper edge, like they controlled the outer edge with the Antarctic Treaty. By the way, no accident. The Antarctic Treaty and the Van Allen radiation belts were declared in the exact same year. Upper edge, outer edge. Coincidence?
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay, I'm really sorry, Mark, but we are running out of time.
Oh no, it's cool. It's cool.
I'm going to ask you one more question.
Okay. I'll ask it to you. Mark, thanks so much for being on this podcast.
Thank you.
No, happy to do it.
Thanks for
great guy. You're a very great guy.
You seem like a good guy. I'd like to meet you in person.
Yeah, we would. Yeah.
And if you ever want to come to University of Victoria and want to hang
out,
out,
you know what? You gotta
let us know.
Oh no, that sounds fun. I'd love to come up again. Remember, I'm only a ferry ride away. I'm down in on Whidbey.
Yeah, Whidbey Island.
Yeah, that'd be good. Come on out. All right, so we have one final question.
Okay. Have I been admitted to a mental institution? What?
If you're gonna drink an alcoholic beverage, what would it be?
What would it be? Like any of them.
Right now, and again, this is an older drink. It's not like a what is it, a Rob Roy or a Manhattan.
Sure,
No,
yeah, yeah.
no, it's because I truly rate the bar that I'm in by this drink, which is a Bloody Mary.
Oh,
Because you can.
I'm more of a Caesar and like.
Oh, well, okay. I'm sorry. Up in Canada, it's called a Caesar, and you're absolutely right.
Give
So
it off to Tommy here. He's gonna.
So Mark, to conclude, I mean, you've been nothing but respectful and
Very respectful.
and we are honestly compelled to believe in the flat Earth model, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean,
We would like to.
yeah.
Well,
we would like to, and you've been a great guest.
well,
so
no,
thank you.
thank you for having me. If
Thank you so much.
you
If
get a
could say
chance here, if you get a chance, let me leave you with this. Obviously, you can look my stuff up at any time. Just type in Mark Sargent or Flat Earth Clues. But the documentary that followed us around for an entire year last year, called Behind the Curve, is on general streaming release. So you can get it on.
Okay, nice.
So check it out if you get a chance. It really will kind of help with, kind of explaining, in fact, Whidbey Island's in quite a few of the shots. So.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
nice.
Hopefully our viewers will as well.
Yeah.
Before you
Right.
go, leave
Yes.
us with one last kind of couple of sentences here. What would you say to somebody who's a non-believer and you had just a phrase to give them to make them believe the Earth is flat?
Okay.
What would you say to
You
them?
have two
The
sentences.
okay. The phrase is: do not take anything I say as gospel. Do not believe a word I say. Do your own research and ask questions, and you'll figure it out for yourself.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you so much, man.
All right, guys.
Thank you so much, Mark.
All right.
Mark.
Talk to you later.
Okay.
Okay. Bye
Thank
bye.
you so much.
Yep.
Bye.